How many here have a 6 or 6.5 inch joiner and a 12 or 12.5 inch thickness planer? And how many of you ripped a board in half so you can get it to go through across the joiner before you go with the thickness planer? Yeah. The hand tool guys are always utterly aghast at people who do that. That's the ultimate insult to the wide board. Wide boards are valuable resources, and they really think you ought to keep them wide. I've heard a couple of people really go off on that, as a matter of fact. One of the ways to do that is find a cheap number 5. This is like the ultimate cheap number 5. It's a craftsman? How do they? It's probably a sergeant, really and truly. Mid-50s craftsmen, I think into the 60s, where Miller's Falls were pretty good, but the sergeant ones, not so much, but this was the right price. Somebody gave it to me. You'll have that experience if you let people know you like planes. People give you planes all the time. And I've got a moderately cupped board here that came from Dan, I think. It's got some numbers on it. And this one's thick enough, you might get away with it, but if you put a 4/4 cup board through your thickness planer, you'll get a thinner cup board out. The feed rollers mash them down. And you know, there's been all kinds of stuff published with planer sleds where you shim them up and fool with them, and the fact is, the other side doesn't have to be real perfect. It certainly doesn't have to be smooth. It just needs to be mostly in the same plane. And it's sort of like, any of you know about hand-scraped surfaces in metalworking. They're all pockmarked and such, but they can be accurate on average to millionths of an inch. And it's sort of the same idea here. The blade I've got in here, you may actually be able to see the curvature on this. It's an 8-inch radius, and it sticks out a good bit, and it's pretty dull. I did a lousy job of grinding it this morning, and a not particularly good job of trying to hone it up here. But surprisingly, it works pretty well. So if you got a board like this, it's stuffed up, you need to get the planer. This is not the best way to hold it, but again, I can get away with it with a thick board. I'll probably show a couple other ways here in a minute. But start off, you can get rid of twist at the same time. Cheap, modern winding sticks. The English boys would tell you to get stuff out of wind. It's not pronounced wind, it's wind. And they had often very ornate mahogany sticks that might have bone or pearl inlays to get contrast. 1-inch aluminum angle was their champ. And aluminum extrusions are extremely straight. And McMaster sells it to you cheap. You put the winding sticks on there, otherwise known as winking sticks back in the day, and you get back and you see how things line up. Ooh, and happily, they look very nice. So I don't have to worry about the twist on this one. Can you guys see the amount of cup? It's about 1/8 of an inch, maybe to that crowd. We got a pretty good gap across there. And the technique that you apply, most people think of planing as always going with the grain, but a great deal of very effective planing is done across the grain. And that's what we'll do here. This is called traversing, and you just start wailing on it. And with that cambered blade, I can really take some pretty serious cuts. Roy Underhill likes to describe them as thick as a soldier's belt, or the thickness of an old groat, obsolete British coin. Okay, not a ton of time involved there, and I'm not quite there, but you can see we've got a decent flat on both sides. I'm burnishing here. This is actually touching, just bare, it's just shy of touching. So I would think maybe 3 or 4 more passes. And you'd, my wife always said, why is Roy Underhill always out of breath? And he's not even a fat guy, so. In just a couple of minutes, you could probably get away, even with a 4/4 board, you could probably get away running through the planer like this, because you get additional support here that you don't have if you had left the full cup in there. And so it goes pretty fast, it's flat enough. Yeah, actually does look pretty decent. So 1 or 2 passes with this side down, then flip it over and go to town. And you're there with your wide board intact. You don't have to glue it back up. You don't get that little funny grain step where you glue it back up. And you'd kill some calories. So, and all it took was a cheap or free number 5. And a camber ground on the blade. The camber on this across the 2-inch width amounts to probably close to 3/32 at the edges. This 8-inch radius is what Chris Schwartz uses. I've seen guys talk about radius as small as 5 inches. Stanley's scrub planes, 40 and 40.5, actually were factory ground with a 3-inch radius. The scrub plane honestly isn't great for this. Scrub plane would be fine if you wanted to knock these sides down before you started, and you can do that. But typically along the grain, you won't be able to take as much as you can across. You don't get much in the way of blowout or spelching, the old British term, at the edges, because the cutting cross grain, it really cuts pretty clean. But number 40 works pretty well that way, but it's too short and too narrow. You know, a 40 is, I think, 1.25-inch blade. So by the time you get that radius on it, you're really only getting a cut about that wide. Where this one, out of a 2-inch blade, I get 1.5 inches, something like that, from scallop to scallop. And so you can keep your wide boards wide.
Can you give us some basics? What do the numbers mean? I mean, you know,
on the Stanleys?
or on any plane?
Oh yeah, well, Stanley's invented the numbers really and truly. And the smooth planes are number 1 through number 4. Bigger, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4.5 is an extra wide 4. It's a little bit longer than a 4, but it's a 2 3/8 blade instead of a 2. Then it gets a little weird. The 5 is the standard jack. It's about 14 inches. The 5 1/4 is the junior jack. It's narrow. It's like 1 inch. I think it's a number 3 blade. It's like 1 3/4 blade. Then there's the 5 1/2, which is the jumbo jack, which has a 2 3/8 blade instead of a 2-inch blade. The early ones had 2 1/4, and you can tell if you got a real old one if it's got a 2 1/4 blade. Then the 6 and 7 are 2 3/8 blades and are just, a 6 is 18 inches. A lot of authors refer to it as a 4-plane, as in coming before doing anything serious, the kind of work I'm doing here. Stanley's advertising at one point referred to it as simply a short joiner. The British were real fond of panel planes, which for doing that would have competed directly with the 6. They were typically 15 to 18 inches. They were hardly ever over 18. And then the 7 is a 2 3/8 wide, but 22 inches long for joining edges for the most part. The 8's the biggest, 24 inches long, and it's a 2 5/8 blade, and it's a beast. You do not need to push down on it. With a good sharp blade, just get behind it, it'll do fine. So, some of the others like Union, Sargent, well, like Record and Marples on their iron planes, like Record added a 0 in front of the Stanley numbers for their corresponding plane. A Jack was an 05. Some of them like Miller's Falls, a 409 is the equivalent of the number 4 Stanley. It's a 9-inch long plane, it's where they get the 9. They'll have a 412 as the Jack. It's length and width, so it's mostly arbitrary. It's up to the manufacturer, but most of it goes back to the Stanleys because they were the same from what, late 1860s.
This is like a Sergeant number 7. This says it's a 414.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, weird number.
Is that right? 414?
Yeah. I don't know what that means, but
I
it's about a number 7.
I would expect it to be a 424, but okay. Huh? So Sargent did some weird things with numbers, and they overlap them a lot. Lee Nielsen copied, in Lee Nielsen planes, they follow the Stanley numbers in terms of sizes and lengths, widths and lengths. So, like that. Anything else? There were, if you ever want to know, and I'll have Dan get a document up on the web next week. If you ever want to know anything about Stanley planes, you go to Patrick Leach's Superior Works Blood and Gore. And he does Stanley planes by the number. He covers every Stanley plane, gives you the production history, tells you the physical characteristics, and includes his own snarky comments. And they are extremely snarky. But I met Patrick down at WIA, and he's just as snarky in person as he is in his writing. So, but everything's there. And if you have a question, one of the things, it's a really good app to have on your phone loaded up to go to his website if you're out shopping for planes, because you can decide what's original and what's not. He'll warn you what to watch for. There are some things get substituted from one very commonly. They break on a rare plane, and so they put a piece of crap off of a 78 or something on it, and they hit you full price for them. And if you keep track of Patrick's stuff, you can avoid getting ripped off like that. So I'll get the reference out there. Patrick publishes a once monthly antique tool list too. He's a pretty fair guy. A little on the high side, but not bad.
When you mentioned the radius blades,
Yeah.
Are all planes, the blades radiused or some of them flat? And if they're radiused, how does a person sharpen those things?
Excuse me a minute. One of the questions, complaints we've had is something we need to probably start thinking about is, could you repeat the questions? Because you've got the mic and a lot of people don't hear the question.
Sure, yeah.
If you would, please.
The question was, how are plane blades delivered? Are they straight, are they radius, whatever? The radius is typically called cambered, by the way. That was what I was going to do in introductory remarks, and someplace I got lost. I don't think any planes have ever come from the factory with cambered blades except for the 40 and 40 and a half scrub planes from Stanley. And like Lee Valley and Lee Nielsen camber their scrub blades now. But basically, they've all come with straight blades. The camber was up to you. What you should do is some matter of discussion. On a smooth plane, for example, Deneb Puhalski, who is like the public face of Lee Nielsen, he's at all their hand tool events, big dude. Do not drink with him. He gives, I think it's actually maybe a video on their website. He showed you how to use a square-cornered straight blade to smooth and get across. You start on one edge, and you overlap a little each time, and it tilts the plane from the uncut to the cut. And of course, you got a margin on each side on the planes that doesn't cut. You got a little piece on each side, because you know the plane here is like 2 3/8 wide, I think, and your blade's 2. So supposedly, and I've gotten close to it, supposedly you can smooth very nicely with a straight blade with unbroken corners by properly overlapping across there, and the last cut takes it clean. For smoothing, I think the right way is probably a cambered blade, but the camber's only about 5/1000ths or so. And you do that during sharpening just by taking extra strokes, put some pressure on the right side and take 5 strokes, put pressure on the left side, take 5 strokes, put the pressure a little closer to center, take 5 strokes, other side of center, and end up on there. And I've been meaning to do one that way, haven't tried it yet, but I've seen enough people do it, I know that it works like a champ. On a jointer, the wisdom has always been where a jointer is mostly used for long straight edges. You're trying to get the edge of a board. It's just what we do with a power jointer. The wisdom has typically been a straight blade there, but if you're not square, if you get your angle out, you have to balance the plane at the right angle to get it, and it's almost impossible to do right, and it's impossible to keep the edge straight. So, trying to think where I first saw it. It's in a bunch of the old books too. A lot of guys camber their jointer blades, and not a lot, more than that 5/1000ths for the smoother, but only like 15 or 20 across the same 2 inches. And if you've got the angle right, you put your finger, I do it on this one. You keep your position sideways on the board by your fingertips as you push, and you center the plane on the edge. So in fact, your edge has a tiny little dip to it, but it amounts to 1/1000th or 2, you know? If your angle's a little bit wrong, if this side's a little high, you push it off center, and the bottom part of that camber takes it away, and then you make a final pass centered again. And you can vary, with repeated passes, you can make that plane roll right over. I've seen that done too. It works. So, awful lot of guys like cambered jointers. And some of them have cambered jointers that they only use to get the edge established, and they'll take one pass, take one light shaving with a straight blade too. I've heard guys doing that. So, the answer is, well, whatever moves you and whatever works for you. On jointers, training wheels are available. This is a jointer gauge or jointer fence. This one's from Goodell Pratt. The Stanley was number 386, and they're hideously expensive used. They're like $150. I think I paid $35 for this Goodell Pratt, which is absolutely equivalent. But you just dial in your angle. You can move it all over the place. You dial in your square angle, hold it to the side of the wood, and go. I haven't tried this one, I've had it for a while. The problem is with any fenced plane, you really ought to have one hand on the tote and one hand pushing the fence in, and you need another one doing this. So you really kind of need 3 hands to use a jointer fence. They were never terribly popular, probably because of that reason. Guys do use them to make shallow bevels. If they have, like they're making Cooper doors or something, guys will run the beveled edges with jointer planes like this. Lee Valley sells one now. It's been out not all that long. It's a universal one. They've had one for several years for their planes that were drilled and tapped on the side. But they've got a universal one available now. It's like $40 or something. So it's the usual Lee Valley extrusions, but like that. Anything else at this point? Okay, so one thing you do with your plane, save your wide boards, keep them wide. Another possibility, if you're making a glue up, and you know the hassle, you gotta get the edges exactly perpendicular to get a straight glue up, otherwise you end up with something like this. The story goes, I think it's still been proven technically true, that no surface glues better than a knife cut surface, a plain surface. So mechanical stuff tends to burnish the surfaces and can limit the glue penetration. There's a little trick. Let's say, where's my chalk? Let's declare these to be the faces, which will be up when we're done. So it will be ultimately like that. So if we fold them like this, carefully line them up as we go in the vise. That's not too bad. Oh, I forgot to shut grain direction. I ought to do that. That can be bad. Oh, that'll work. A little left-handed. What the hell?
Does everybody know what you just did?
Probably not.
Okay.
And again, there will be something in the write-up on, you need to judge your grain direction. If you've run power joiner, you know you gotta do that, it gets huge tear out. You have to do the same thing with hand joining. You can read the grain, probably. Chris Schwartz had an article in Woodwork magazine, or the one that's defunct, which they just republished in Popular Science on their website. And I couldn't find the sucker, and I got a hold of him, and he told me where to find it. He says you think of trees are cones. The growth rings aren't cylinders, they're bigger at the bottom. So trees are cones. And by reading, looking at the end grain, and deciding whether you're on the bark side or the heart side, and looking at the cathedral that you always get in flax-on lumber, and I never remember which, I've been trying to come up with a rhyme to remind me. I think it's on the heart, you go the direction the cathedrals are pointing, and on the bark you go opposite. I don't remember. I'll get you the article. It can help you judge grain in ones where you can't see edges, for example. This I can see the edge, I'm pretty sure, pretty confident that this will go without tearing anything up. You use a different jack for this, which I took out of the body a few minutes ago. See how it goes.
Something real manly about that, isn't there?
Oh, there is, yeah. I will include has anybody here seen the video of Portlandia? Mm-hmm. In the web article I'll put up, I'll include a link to a Portlandia episode where they talk about a fellow who builds furniture. It's a scream. Got definite traction problems here. Oh. That's right, that's good. There we go. The deal is, and I was planning on doing it really wonky, the angles, if you get this side low, that means you're going to make this side high. And when you put them together, the high spot's going to go into the low spot. And these parts are going to match because they're together. And so no matter what angle you're playing on there, they will fit together perfectly and give you an absolutely flat panel, and unfortunately I planed some ground into that, which which is not great. It's backwards for a proper spring joint. But if you, having seen what I've done here, I'd put it back and do some stop strokes in the center and get this down. Because that's always the tendency. Planes tend to crown things. You need to plane out the center and then join it when you're done. But you have the ideal surface for a glue out. The angles will be perfect. And I will note you can do this with a powered joiner. If your boards are accurately parallel sided, if you put one against the fence, the face against the fence, the other one the back against the fence, if your fence isn't perfect, they cancel. So this isn't just for hand planes, it works for power joiner too. I did it on a bench top one time, worked like a champ. Everybody get the principle we're after there? High spot cancels the low spot, and there you are. Just don't cram it. This is the way the British would do it. It's open at the ends. It's not a lot. It's 15,000 put that in, which is a lot. But the British loved pinch dogs, which were just pieces of steel that were tapered. It went out, down, and it was tapered towards the center. And when you drove them into the end of two boards like this, you put it across the joint. And when you drove them in, that wedge would spring them together. And they would plane their boards hollow at the ends, specifically so that the center would pull tight with the pinch dogs at the end. When we do a spring joint, we usually plane out the center, leave it hollow in the center, so that you put a single clamp on it and clamp the whole side. And that helps stability of the glue joint out at the ends, because the moisture interchange is faster at the ends than it is in the middle. And it is more likely to break the glue joint out there. And this, by springing it hollow in the center, you actually put some tension on there that helps overcome the possibility of breaking the glue joint from seasonal expansion. And planes will let you do that. It's kind of a pain. Anybody here do spring joints on a power jointer? That seems like something Weber might have done. It's a whole lot easier with a hand plane, I think. And there are a lot of folks that swear it's the only way to get a table that'll hold up for 200 years is to spring them so that the tips are under tension. That you have to pull them together in the center and preload those tips. So, questions there? What else have I got? The question with cambered blade, I've got a nick in my joiner blades at the moment, and it leaves a little trail of wood that's humped up a little. If you've got a smooth plane that's got 4,000 or 5,000 camber to it, you can go down one of those lumps, one or two passes, and it's just gone. You don't have to, if the joiner's doing a good job for you otherwise, you don't have to fool around. You put off, something like that's always going to happen near the end of a project. You can just take a swipe with a slightly cambered smooth plane right down that tiny hump, and it's gone. So they're very nice for that. Dan is going to show you shooting in grain and miters, I hope.
Yeah.
That sound right? I was going to show you, and I didn't have time to make the jig. One of the things, because of these margins at the side that don't cut, that's what makes Dan's shooting board possible. The plane rides against that margin, it fences that margin, and lets him run a perfectly straight line. You can also set it up where you got support on both sides. You make up a couple of blocks with cuts in them and put them onto a baseboard. And if you want to make a whole bunch of little skinny tiny sticks that are all very precisely the same thickness, you drop them down in between there, plane until they have a stop on the end. You plane until it stops cutting, and every stick will be absolutely identical to its neighbors. You guys know what shoji is? The Japanese screens that are lattice work, tend to be lattice work. The Japanese use a fixture like that with their wooden planes to make the hundreds or thousands of tiny sticks that absolutely have to be the same dimensions or the geometry won't work out. They're easy fixtures to make, and you can make it so that you, like to make a square or make a rectangle, you can put shims in there. You don't have to make new guide strips every time. And you got a little bit to play with on the cut depth, but you got to keep it thin, so you really can't do much there. But you can put shims in there to finish. You'll start with the wood sitting down and then put the shims in to get final thickness. Yeah, if Dan shows us the shooting board, we'd probably be getting towards the break at that point, I suspect, wouldn't we?
You want me to do it now? We're after the break.
I haven't even looked at the
I
time.
got a question.
What?
You ever backpedal your blades?
Say again?
You ever backpedal your?
Oh, yeah, and I still haven't done this.
Question again?
I'll get back to it in a minute. Can you get that?
Repeat the question.
Wanted to introduce you to start with. I did a bad job of talking about the plane nomenclature.
Say what the question was.
Let's talk about the angles first, and then I'll get to his question so that we're all talking on the same terms. This is a plane blade here, the wood, the frog, the part of the plane that supports the blade, and this is the front of the plane, whatever. This would be like a wooden plane. They call this little area right in front of the mouth. This opening is the mouth. This area is called the wear, like W-E-A-R. You've got fundamentally three ways to control tear out with hand planes. One is, well, beyond sharpness, which is everything. But you've got the pitch angle, which is measured from here up to, on a bevel down plane like these bench planes, measured up to the face of the iron, as long as it's not tapered. But it is the face of the iron, even if it is tapered, actually. If it's a parallel iron, it matches the bed angle or the frog angle. Standard planes are set up at what's called common pitch, 45 degrees from here to here. A lot of molding planes are what's called cabinet pitch. That's raised up to 60 degrees. That's called cabinet pitch or half pitch. If you remember your geometry, the proportions of a 30, 60, 90 triangle are 1, 2, square root of 3. And I'm pretty sure that's why they declared it half pitch. Lee Valley a few years ago, and I think Lee Nielsen does too, they offer York pitch frogs, which is 50 instead of 45. And then 55 degrees is called middle pitch. And used to, long ago, you went in to order a plane from the local plane maker, you specified what pitch you wanted in that way. Lee Valley on their custom plane, I think you can order it by 1 degree increments now, if you get the urge. So, the choice of pitch, 45 is a, well-behaved wood of any kind, but especially softwoods, 45 is great. It's no problem at all. So you got, to control tear out, you've got pitch angle, mouth opening. If you keep the mouth small, the front part of the sole of the plane presses down on the wood fibers until they've broken. So the split doesn't run forward and tear out. So you got pitch angle, mouth angle, and oh geez, that's terrible. What's third? Oh, chip breaker. I don't show it on here. Need to add that. Don't know where my chalk is. Chip breaker on your plane.
It's in your pocket.
Yeah, probably. I don't know where the box is. That's terrible. Chip breakers are another piece of steel, usually bowed up. Sometimes they're just the shapes cut into them. They bear on the blade only at the tip, and then the lever cap pushes down here to lock everything down. The chip breaker is sometimes called a back iron or top iron. If it's set very close to the edge, you can, at any pitch, you can cut without tear out. With or against the grain, it doesn't care. And there's a very nice Japanese video from a couple of professors named Kato and Kawai, which I will include in the document. There's one available that even has English subtitles. So by setting the chip breaker very close, but it's close. It's like 3 or 4 thousandths from the edge. Everything has to be perfect. You move it back to 15 thousandths. A lot of recommendations in the past have been a 32nd to a 16th or something like that. That chip breaker might as well not be there. All it is there to brace up the tip of the blade. But if you set it down tight, you can plane anything with a 45, with a common pitch plane. And the old boys knew this. These are called double irons. Up until what? Mid 1700s or something, all planes were single irons. They didn't have a cap iron. All they had to control pitch was mouth opening and pitch. And 60-degree pitch is okay, but it's real hard to push. It's getting more like scraping, and it's real hard to push. Somewhere in the late 1700s, they started coming out with charging extra for double irons, the cap irons, and they understood. The books make it clear, the few books that are around from that time, make it clear these guys understood that sucker had to be real tight to the edge. And the Kato and Kawai video shows why. It's a beautiful piece of work. University research in Japan, but which is kind of weird in this day and age, but they did it. So, back to the question, is it?
Back beveling.
What?
Back beveling.
Oh, back beveling, yes. Back beveling is when we knock this angle off a little bit, we can put a steeper bevel on there, and you can make your 45-degree plane act like it's 60. Because right down where the steel meets the wood, it is 60. Okay? Your pitch angle is no longer up to the top of the blade. The pitch angle is now around to where the line would be up here. So your plane gets hard to push, and you can plane anything with it. You know? It complicates sharpening a little bit, but it really does the job. And the old boys knew that too. They used to do it, particularly on their single iron planes where they didn't have a cap iron. They would definitely do back bevels when stuff was tight. A lot of times they would keep one plane dedicated. They'd have the back bevel cut onto just a plane they used only for horrendous stuff, where we might have 2 or 3 planes. But that's the back bevel you're referring to, right? On bevel up planes, like block planes and the bigger variants now, that back bevel comes down to your bevel's going the other direction. Your bevel's now up. And they changed the grind angle here. You can buy 38 and 50-degree blades instead of 25-degree blades and turn your low angle plane into a very high angle plane just by swapping out blades. And they don't require any additional sharpenings, which is kind of nice. It's one of the things that's been pushed on them. So the deal with the 3 things, cap iron, pitch angle, or throat. And a tight throat means just the width of the shaving. A really finely tuned smoothing plane, that throat's under 5 thousandths. 5 thousandths is sloppy. 10, you throw the plane away. Because it should be just the width of the shaving, but they'll plane anything. And again, they don't care about the angle. But those 3 factors, you can usually only use 2 of the 3, and sometimes not even that. If you use a cap iron and you choke the mouth up real tight, that plane won't pass shavings. It just will not cut. It'll jam up instantly. With cap iron and high pitch, they get where you can't push them, and they'll actually rise up out of the cut. So 2 out of 3 is the best you can hope for. And a lot of times you're really concentrate on one of those 3 things. So block planes usually have, the better ones have adjustable mouths. So on them you get to play with by the angle of the pitch and the mouth opening. And they don't have cap irons. So anything pressing down here, it's always far back, the edge that cuts is clear down here. So, yeah, they have some kind of levered cap, but it doesn't have any effect on the cut. It's just there as a mechanical restraint. Anything else? There? Is that clear? But that's, people have paid huge money to get high angle planes. And all you gotta do is the back bevel, just tip it up, and life is good. What, anybody hear of the David Charlesworth's ruler trick for planing things? They, did I bring that? Ah. Using the thin, flexible little stainless steel rulers, you lay it on your sharpening stone when you're doing the back. Normally on the flat part of the blade, you want to keep it absolutely perfectly flat on the stones. But if you do that, you got to polish a pretty big area. And to get going faster, Charlesworth came up with lay a ruler down. It gives you about a degree or two of back bevel. Just like, and that's not enough for you to notice any difference in effort. But it means that you can polish, a strip 30 thousandths wide in about 3 swipes, you're done. Because you're having to move so little metal. And with the oil on the stone or water on the stone, if you're using a water stone, ruler just sits there, you don't have to fool with it. And it was apparently known long ago. Well, there's been a lot of honing directions over the years that say to raise the blade up for the last couple passes when you're doing the back. Same thing. The ruler makes it predictable and repeatable, and it's a good way to get going again fast, particularly if you have not properly polished the whole back, which is really an awful job. But critical for a high performance smoother, for example, it's absolutely critical. You have to do it.
A shooting board basically is a way to use a hand plane to take very fine cuts on wood. If you're trying to fine tune boards that are going together and you just need to take a hair off of something, a shooting board's a great way to go. So I put this one together. What you have is this slot here that the plane rides in, and then I have this fence, which is 90 degrees to the slot. And so now I'll put my plane in here, slide it across, and slice a little bit off the board and get an exact 90-degree cut. The way I made this is this board here, I just screwed in some slots so I can unscrew it a little bit and adjust it and tweak it so it's exactly 90 degrees. Because if you kind of guess and screw this in, it's easy to twist it a little bit as you're screwing it in. Also, I've got a little fence right here to keep my hand plane from sliding off the edge. You can buy shooting boards, and you can buy specially made shooting planes. The planes cost about $500 from Lee Nielsen. They're very expensive. And so instead of buying one, I sort of just got a number 6, which is a big joiner plane. And I added my own handle onto it to make it a little easier to hold onto. So I'll show you what I did there. The plane has to be held, lays on its side in that slot. And so for the handle, if I were to put it in here and try to hold on the handle, that doesn't work very well. And I have, before I put my hand just on the top of the plane and I would slide it across like that. But to make it more comfortable, I just took a piece of scrap wood, put a handle on it, and kind of screwed a board underneath and kind of pinched the plane in between a couple of boards. And that works pretty well. And now a lot more comfortably I can move it. This this board also has a board on the bottom, which will kind of catch on the table or whatever, so now as I'm using it, it's not sliding all over. Often I'll clamp it also to my table, so I have that, and then I can, if I'm really going to be doing a lot, I can put a dog or this thing here, which is this version of hold fast. So this one is really, I mean, the hold fast are nice. You just hit it with a hammer, and then you hit it with a hammer to loosen it. This one you just tighten this nut, and it tightens itself down. So I've got some boards here, and I'll just kind of show you how it works. So say on my radial arm saw, mine actually is off about 1/2 degree. So, you know, if I cross-cut a board and I know it's important, I'll put it on the shooting board and straighten it out. And I've tried to straighten my fence out on my radial arm saw, but I can never get it just right. So I put the board, move this. So I've got my plane set up for a pretty fine cut, and I've just kind of pushed the board up against the plane and just kind of hold it there and slice it across there.
Note that because he references to the plane at the start of the cut, the amount removed from the workpiece is exactly his depth cutting, his depth of cut, the setting on the plane, which can easily be 1 or 2 thousandths. I mean, you can sneak up on stuff so precisely, there's just no other way to do it. On the meeting announcement, it said nothing can, it was supposed to say nothing except a plane can let you sneak up on things. It said nothing, but
this really, I mean, you can just fine tune a fit with this shooting board. So I've got it set up for 90 degrees, which is, you know, where most of us are going to be cutting. But sometimes if you're doing a picture frame or something, you'll want a 45 degree. And so to do that, I just have another board that I screw on here, and I'll just kind of show you how that works. So I just take my cheap old tri-square, put it in here, and then screw that in. So then if I'm doing a picture frame and I have miters, and you know, often you do all those miters and you try to put it together and it's off just a touch. Well, to fix that, you can put it on your shooting board. And there again, just slice across there. And just take a hair off of that so you can adjust your angle and get it exactly on. So the one thing you do have to worry about when you're using this is the back edge of your board can kind of pop out, the fibers can. So it's really important to have this fence exactly up against this hand plane so that is supporting those fibers at the end. Same way with that original fence. And I can actually loosen it up and move it over a little bit more if I need to also. So it's a really handy tool. The other thing you can use to do with this is if I'm doing a box where all 4 corners are mitered, then you have to do it a little bit differently. You can't really use this to straighten out your miters. So instead I have this type deal that I put on my, put up against there, and then I'll screw it into the table. And then I can take my board that has my miters put it on here, hold it, and do the same thing. Cut off the edge to get the angle just right. So it's a handy thing to have. You know, I'd recommend making one. They're pretty simple to make. I mean, if you want to spend $500 on a nice plane, you can do that. And those are really, you know, they're heavier duty planes. The blade is skewed at a little bit of an angle, so it makes the cutting a little bit easier, but pretty costly. So that's about all I got on the shooting board. Any questions? Yeah.
Where do you get the plans?
I just kind of made it up. You know, just make sure things are at 90 degrees. That little groove in here, make sure that fits the width of your plane here. I did make a couple of them before I got this one that worked a little bit better. You know, you can put some wax in this groove too, also to make it slide a little bit. But once you get it, you know, everything just right, it'll last forever, so.
I'll look a couple plans up on the internet and give them to Dan to get on the
Sure.
website, because there's a bunch of neat symbols out there.
The generic name for this angle attachment is donkey's ear, by the way.
Just like,
If it's down flat, it's a shooting board, but if it's standing the board up like that, it's a donkey's ear. So, and again, there's lots of plans out there for them too, different ways to make those.
Hey Dan, what kind of plane is that?
This is a Lee Nielsen number 6.
Okay. I'm noticing it has the square wings instead of the rounded wings like me and Stanley's house.
Oh, right here?
Yeah, right there, which makes it a lot easier to.
Yeah, right. You really need to have that square thing to be able to ride in the slot. Sure.
When my daughter was in 4-H, she was making a box, and we were hand sawing the sides, and we were actually doing long grain shooting with a Stanley block plane that admittedly I had totally remachined, so it was perfectly square. But we clamped her boards down, and she planed until she came up against the edge that you normally register to, and again, she got absolutely perfect boards out of it. We turned them around, shoot the ends, and we were there. And the 4-H people seemed to think we were subversive as hell, but it really takes a lot of the skill out of it. Once you get it set up, you can do it half asleep and still get good results. Nothing else like it.
And it's kind of a cool sound too, when you slice that little piece of it.
A real quick one that is a chair maker's trick, but if you're making tables or anything else, it works. If you got a jack plane and you got a table or a chair that doesn't sit quite right, it's rocking this way, so these are the high ones, the long ones. You can put a plane in your vise upside down. You just go over, pull it across. I'm set pretty fine, so I'm probably not going to get there, but courtesy Mr. Underhill, you get the idea. You end up with a cut. You can very gradually lower the high or the long legs. You can cut them off a couple thousandths at a time, and because you've got this set coplanar with your workbench, everything's at the right angles. So when you're done, all you got to do is file a little bevel on it. You're in business. So.
And then you gotta plane the floor, so the floor is perfect.
Well, there's that. But, you know, the best compromise seems to be to get them flat to start with. So I brought my mom's old ragged stool for that. That's the only thing I had with wood legs. One of my favorite planes, which you can tell, well, you can't see the total collection of them, but router planes, definitely not normed router. You've got a cutter here that they're either square across and you get different widths. Some of them are spear points, which I've got somewhere. These things are pointy and they cut on the edges. There we go. See the shape of that one? That can be real handy when you're working down in the groove. But router planes, small ones, like the Stanley 271, are really lovely for doing like hinge mortises. You just hold your hinge against it, set the cutter to match the depth, and lock it down. And then you can lay your hinge on there and knife around it, maybe chisel out. Dan tells me he usually chisels them a good bit of the way. And then you take some fine shavings and it will be exactly parallel. The bottom of your hinge mortise will be exactly parallel to the board around it. And the 271 was especially for that. The 271's long since out of production. But Lee Valley makes 3 different plow planes, small, medium, and large. One of the cool things about their large is the cutters fit the old ones. This is a Miller's Fall with a Lee Valley cutter in it. The Stanley 71, 71 and a half. Lee Valley cutters work, you just have to turn the adjuster wheel upside down. It's the only thing difference. One of the cool things to do with these, the bigger ones, is there is no finer way to adjust a tenon or a dado than these. If you want things, you got a tenon here, and you want it's a little tall or it's rough. I nibbled these with an ATB blade, so it's kind of ragged. But you set your router plane for a light cut, and you just swing the plane this way. I'm taking, I don't know, maybe 5 thousandths, not much more. But now I have a very smooth tenon that is guaranteed parallel to this surface, and I can adjust it with the little screw. I can adjust it 1,000th or 2 at a time. Same thing on I've got a dado here that it was cut with the same AT blade, actually set with the same blade setting. If you've got a dado, particularly like you were doing plywood or something, and it rode up a little as you went across the dado stack, and so you got a shallow spot in your dado. Dan was telling me he faces these with some regularity, and I said, featherboard, dude. But if you haven't put the featherboard on there and you've got some wobbles in the bottom of your dado, you can come in with a router plane and just cut your way along. I'm not taking much more than a powder here. But all those wobblies from the nasty ATB blade are gone. And I'm guaranteed, because the bottom of this blade is fixed relative to this sole surface, I'm guaranteed that the bottom of that dado is exactly parallel to the top surface. There's a new tool company, Walkmore. It's W-A-L-K-E, and everybody wants to call it Walkie-More. I got to talk to Aaron Moore about it. It is Walkmore. They're making a reproduction of a Preston router plane, which is a base about this big, and it has 3 different places you can mount the blade, and you can aim it out or you can aim it in at each of those places. And particularly for trimming like this, you end up with about this much of your router on the rail, and so you got perfect support. You just put your cutters in at 90 degrees even more. This one, there's no room to turn this cutter 90 degrees, but on that Walkmore plane, you can turn the cutter 90 degrees. You've got massive support, and they're just gorgeous. They're made in bronze, and they're a little expensive, but very sweet. The Lee Valley ones are not real expensive. I remember they vary by 50 bucks. I think it's 109, 159, and 209, or something like that, from small to large. Very useful tools. Any type of mortise. Let's say you were doing a lock mortise on the front of a chest and you got things a little wonky inside. Because this blade extends out some, you could actually put this on the face of the chest and work down. You couldn't get very far. You can only get so far down into the mortise. But you could establish a reference surface on the back of the lock mortise, which you could then pare down with a chisel. and maybe save yourself from a wonky cocked lock that wouldn't be good. So a modern tool, or a tool that most people I think probably don't know about. They are available in new production. I think Lee Nielsen has threatened to make one for years and still hasn't. Isn't that correct, Dan?
I think they're making one now.
Are they got one now? But the Lee Valleys are just great planes, and if you find an old one, I bought this one from England, oddly enough. If you find an old one, the Lee Valley cutters fit, and there's a huge range of cutters available for them in widths and the spear points and such. So a worthwhile plane to have if you do a lot of mortise and tenon.
What are the Stanley numbers?
71 and a half.
Yeah, 70.
Yeah.
And one of them has the cutter on the front. And one
Yeah.
the other one's like.
This is a closed throat. You can see the blade is completely surrounded.
Right.
And Miller's Fall also made an open throat version where this is a U-shaped thing. Stanley made this cut is a U-shape, and they've got an arch over it. And I don't remember if the entire production history it was made or not, but they also have a foot you can put in there to close that throat up, and also give you a depth stop. You run into problems if you just set it to full depth to start with. It's obviously way too much to be bringing out of there. So the modern, oh yeah, that's right. I totally spaced. I know Lee Nielsen's product on those. The new ones have depth stops that you can, you set your final depth with the depth stop, and then you use the screw to crank it up so you only take 10 or 15 thousandths at a cut. And when the depth stop bottoms out, you're done. I bought shaft collars and knobs to put depth stops on this one, the 271. It's less than $10 at McMaster's. And you have to file a notch in the depth stop, or the shaft collar that fits this one. You have to file a notch with a round file, and for that one you have to drill a 3/16 hole out to a 7/32 hole. And for under $10 you got depth stops on your vintage planes. So those really are crucial. Particularly if you don't like repeat locks or repeat hinges, you'd either have to go through and take all of them to a particular depth and then dial in 10 thousandths and go do them again. Or if you can set a depth stop, you just work your way down, finish that one, and move on. So they're a nice thing to have. I think the Lee Nielsen depth stop fits the vintage cutters, but you have to file a notch to get around the adjustment shaft or something. I don't know. There's a blogger called Ralph Balmano, the accidental woodworker, who just did that to some of his Stanley planes. But they haven't been made for a long time here. They did some in England, but not here. Is that 10 till 12? I guess it is, isn't it? At 10 till 12, I'm sure you don't want to hear it. So it's been great having your attention today, and I hope I gave you something useful. If you have, a warning to anybody who fools with vintage planes. Every thread on a Stanley plane is a bastard thread, okay? Their quarter 20 is never there, 10/24 is never there. They had their own threads for everything. And so if you have a missing screw, find somebody who sells salvage plane parts. Don't go to the hardware store. You ain't gonna find it. So, and don't jam standard hardware into those funky holes. Like they use a 1027, I think, is one of their sizes, and stuff like that. So beware. They're a lot of fun to restore, but the fasteners are a pain in the butt. So. Like that.
Roger.